Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. I am thrilled to have Kelly Hogan joining us today. She has been following a zero-carb carnivorous lifestyle for about 9 years, and she tells us her entire story, which is absolutely fascinating, and how she struggled with being severely overweight and obese for many, many years until she found the low-carb diet and keto, and then also went zero-carb, and how it has impacted her health over the years. And it was such a delight to chat with Kelly. She is such a lovely human being, and I really enjoyed getting the chance to hear more about her story, and I hope that you guys enjoy hearing more about it today too. So on to today's episode with Kelly Hogan. I wanted to let you guys know I have been working on a new version of my original free ebook that I posted and released in 2015, and I've just been working on some revisions to it. If you are subscribed to the Ketogenic Girl newsletter, if you have signed up for the free ebook at any time, you are probably on the list and will receive it when I put it out. But if you want to make sure, or if you haven't signed up for it yet, you can go to ketogenicgirl.com and click on free ebook, put your name and email in there, and as soon as the new version is released later this week, you will receive a fresh copy in your inbox. So be sure to check that out and sign up. I don't send out a lot of newsletters, but I do like to send out some recipes sometime, or I'll send out notices of any special sales. But for the most part, I don't send out a ton of emails. I don't really like to get a lot of emails myself, so that's probably why I don't send them out a lot. But if I have something important to say or something really cool that I think that you'll like, I do like to send that out. And that is for sure the free ebook, which has some great information in there that I've assembled for anyone either just starting out on keto or who may like to use it as a reference guide or something to send along to other people as well who are just starting keto. So check it out at ketogenicgirl.com under free ebook. If you are interested in trying out a ketogenic diet for yourself, or you have been doing keto for a while and just not getting the results that you're looking for, I recommend you check out my 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. What it is a full 28-day meal plan and program that includes all the recipes and foods that you need to eat for 28 days. I call it the 28-day challenge because it's just a great way to get past all the information overwhelm. There's so much information online about keto, and this way you can just get past that. All the macros are calculated for you to get into a state of ketosis, and I was able to do that by using tried and true proven macro approaches that I've developed over several years of doing the keto diet and working with over 3,000 people to date on this program. Our Ketogenic Girl community in the members group is incredible. Everyone in there is so supportive, providing helpful tips and hints and sharing their successes and struggles and challenges as well in the group together, because we're all in this together gaining more health. The 20-day challenge program comes with weekly shopping lists, meal plan overviews, a guide to testing yourself and interpreting the results for keto, and it also comes with my support and coaching in our members only group. So go check it out at ketogenicgirl.com. It's the 28-day challenge, and any purchase of the 20-day meal plans gets you access into the challenge. You can choose to get the program either soft copy or with a printed copy as well. It's printed on beautiful paper, spiral bound, and I ship it out to you the same day. So go check it out, the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risks or that are incompatible with the ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown, so you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian. Welcome, Kelly. It's so great to have you here with us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so I had such a great time reading your blog. I really enjoyed the way that you write. You have a great flair for writing. For anyone who may not be familiar with you or your story, maybe you could start out just by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, basically, I was heavy my entire life. I was born a big baby and just stayed a big kid. Through middle school, I was the largest in the class, height-wise and just size-wise. I was just always really heavy. And my brother, who's 2 years younger than I am, he was always extremely thin. We ate at the same table. We ate the same things. I just couldn't lose weight. And I don't actually ever remember not caring about my size. From the time I was very young, it bothered me. My brother picked on me, which is, I know, a normal thing for brothers and sisters, but it really did. It bothered me a lot. When I got to middle school, my weight went up even more all through high school until I was probably about a junior in high school, maybe 16 years old. I started to just literally starve myself. It's the only way I ever found I could lose any weight. I grew up with a phase of low fat, like a lot of other adults. We heard low fat, low fat. And that's what I did. I ate so much cereal that was fat-free cereal with fat-free skim milk and just could not fathom how I was still fat. It was a very depressing, upsetting thing in my life. And if at any point I had found a magic genie in a bottle, definitely I should have gone for something like world peace, but I would have just said, could I please eat anything I want and just be skinny? It's all I ever wanted. And I'd lose weight in high school and then I'd gain it back because eventually you have to eat, and I'd go right back to the fat-free things, which is all I knew to do. Throughout college, I gained another 40 pounds. And by the time I was ready to get married, which was quite young, my husband and I started dating when I was only 16. And he was a very thin guy. I was always self-conscious about him, but he loved me and he didn't do anything to make me feel that way. I just did. That was just me. By the time we got married, when I was about 23, I weighed about 260 pounds. It was a size 22, 24 wedding dress. I went to the doctor multiple times within my first few years of marriage because I was having repeated abscesses. There was these, I know this is really sexy talk, but I had these boils that kept coming up on me, on my legs, the backs of my legs. And it would start off with just a really painful big bump, and I would have to go get them drained and packed. It was awful. Cellulitis on my legs. I was 25 at this point, and I could hardly walk when I would get these on my legs due to the cellulitis. I was wanting to have children, but that wasn't going anywhere. I was just kind of miserable. And when I went to my doctor for yet another place to be lanced, he said, you know, you're going to keep getting these. It's inflammation, and you need to lose at least 100 pounds. Well, I just burst into tears because I told him, I said, my whole life, that's all I'd love to do. I don't know what else to do. And I had tried exercise. I had tried restricting. It's not like I was one out there just binge eating on donuts. I wasn't. I was really, truly trying. I had the motivation. I just didn't know what to do. And he said, look, you need to cut out carbohydrates. And at age 25, which that was 14 years ago, I didn't even know what a carbohydrate was. I literally asked him, what is that exactly? I'd heard of them, but I didn't know. Right. And he told me, he said, here's a little pamphlet. It'll explain on this side are all the carbohydrates. Don't touch these. He said, I don't care if it's your birthday. Don't touch them for 1 year. He said, I'm going to make an appointment for you in 1 year, and I don't think I'm going to see you again. If you do what I'm telling you, I don't plan to see you again for 1 year. And at this point, I was having to go just every few to several months to get another place lanced. And he said, on the other side are the foods that I don't care how much you eat. And on the other side, of course, being a keto girl, you know, you had all kinds of meats, cheeses, mostly meats, but he did have a few very low carb vegetables. And that's what I started off with. And I was never much of a vegetable girl. So even from day one, I didn't go out and like, oh, great, I can eat all the kale I want. But it was on there if I had wanted it. And I mostly just focused on the meat, eggs, and cheese. 1 year later, I went back to see him. Oh, and I said, and you're sure? As much as I want. He said, as much as you want, as long as you are only eating from this side of the paper. And when I went back a year later, I had lost 80 pounds, and he did not even know who I was when I came through the door. He had to look at my file, and he said, oh, my word. He said, no one ever listens to me. I said, well, I really did. I really did. And I felt so good that I knew I would never go back. And I followed his plan for 5 years. Now, there were a couple of pieces I was still missing at that point. I was missing the fact that fat really was my friend. So I wasn't eating really high fat meats. And so as a result, I wasn't at my optimal. I also thought that the little workouts I was doing was a big part of why I was losing weight. So I started focusing on that a lot. So I knew, don't eat the carbs, keep going to the gym, and try to eat less fatty meats. Okay, well, that didn't go perfectly. I did lose weight, but I was tired. I didn't have a ton of energy because I was eating the leaner meats and I was wearing myself out. I completely lost my cycle during this time, my menstrual cycle. So getting pregnant then, that becomes a challenge. I was less focused on that. Yeah. I mean, it's some people describe it as rabbit starvation. You don't have the carbs. You also don't have the fat you need. You have a lot of brain fog going on. And I felt all of those things. So I did that for 5 years. I really do have a lot of willpower. And I had to use it for those 5 years. But at the end of that, I realized I can't live this way forever. So I started doing some Googling on number one, can you even live without carbs forever? Is that safe? And a very quick Google search led me to Stefansson and to The Bear and to a group called Zeroing In on Health, which is now a Facebook page. But at that point, it was just like a forum for people to post journals. All three of those resources very clearly said, yes, you could live on meat forever, but no, you can't do it like you're doing it. And so I needed to up my fat levels to just eating real meat, not like pouring fat all over my food or fat bombs, but just eat a steak for heaven's sakes, not the chicken breast. And that it was okay to cut out those last vegetables. In fact, it would cure those cravings that I was having. For 5 years, I did have horrible cravings. I wanted sweet so bad. And I did have some sweeteners just to help fix that. I was still using like the stevia stuff. So I was not a full-blown zero carb carnivore at that point. Mm-hmm. And once I followed their advice and went straight to just meat, eggs, and cheese, skipped anything sweet, stopped worrying about trying to do any calorie restricting and killing myself in the gym, then like Wonder Woman powers kicked in. I felt awesome. Almost immediately, it was like blood started rushing through my veins again. I felt so alive and my brain wasn't foggy. And I knew, okay, yes, I looked how I wanted to before. And now I was feeling like I wanted to feel. Because I had restricted for so long, when I first went zero carb carnivore, I gained about 20 pounds over the course of 6 months. And that was pretty traumatizing. I was quite thin when I started and quite overworked and hungry. So when they said, eat steak, it doesn't have to be low calorie, just eat. I did. And I felt so good that I hung in there for 6 months. I whined about it on that forum to anybody that would listen. And they said, yes, dear, eat. Just trust your body. And at the end of that 6 months, my cycle came back. I was still feeling good. The 20 pounds very quickly came back off. And I realized, oh, I really could live this way forever. Within about 8 months of starting zero carb and only a couple months of having my cycle back, I was pregnant, which was something I'd wanted for years. By that point, I'd been married for 8 years. And I couldn't think of any other way I would ever want to live again.
Right. So when you first made the transition going from low carb, I guess sort of keto to zero carb, you were kind of going off all the sweeteners and all of those things. You said you had some diet drinks and things, sweet foods in your diet that you still craved. So when you went off all of those, were you doing a lot of dairy as well with the meat, or like, what does that look like?
Well, when I very first started, they recommended just meat. So I really wasn't. So zero carb diet, we say anything from the animal kingdom. So all meats, eggs, and cheese is acceptable. And that's what I do now.
So like butter and cream?
Yep. Butter, cream, and I don't eat a lot of cheese, but there are plenty of zero carbers that do eat cheese.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they feel good doing it. For me, if I eat a lot of dairy or drink a lot of dairy, whatever form it's in, I tend to get a little bit of nasal drainage, congestion, and I just don't feel my best. But there are some that say they feel fine with it. It is considered part of a zero carb diet if you can handle it. But in the very beginning, I just ate meat and I crave the fat. It's like the fattier the meat at that point, it just tasted so good. And it makes sense based on my background why that would have just tasted like heaven. And I did. I would just go and ask my butcher, could you please just give me a really fatty cut of meat? And that's what I ate all day long, and it tasted great. And for 6 months, I was eating probably more like 3 to 4 pounds of meat per day at that point. For 6 months, I was ravenous. Yep, just ravenous. And now it's more like ever since that 6 months, my appetite backed off a little. So I eat just a measly 2 pounds of meat per day now. So that's still, by most standards, that's still a lot. But that's just what it takes for me to feel very happy and full all day long.
I have to say, one of my guilty pleasures when we go to eat dinner, we'll go to a steakhouse and the waiter's always pointing out, the lean cuts of meat to me. And I'm like, nope. I want the fattiest cut possible. I want that ribeye and also a side of butter with it as well. And it's kind of funny just to see their reactions because it is so new to them and they see like a slender looking woman and they just assume that you're, avoiding fat like everyone else, avoiding fat like the plague. So it is kind of funny. And like you said with your butcher too, those kinds of reactions.
I am right there with you. My husband and I just went to Outback for a date night a week or so ago. And the waitress was a very small woman. And I said, I just need we were trying to order kind of quickly because somebody was watching the kids. I said, I just need a really big steak, a ribeye. I said, please tell them, do not trim it. I need a really untrimmed ribeye, just like 20 ounces of meat with no sides. And she said, oh, that really is the tastiest part. I said, right, it really is. Yeah. But she did look surprised. Yes, she did look surprised. And it still tickles me.
That's so funny. I did the exact same thing last weekend when we went out for dinner. And I like to ask for cold slices of butter with it because if you order like a butter sauce, there's usually brandy in it or flour or hidden carbs and sugars in it. But if you just get cold butter and put it on steak and it melts on the hot steak, I just love it. It's absolute heaven for me right now.
Delicious.
Yeah, I get some funny looks.
I bet. And most people do seem to handle butter better than cheese.
I'm really curious about the whole dairy situation. I've been doing a lot of reading about how cheese has these casomorphins, which are peptides that are broken down, and it creates these morphine-like effects on the brain. And I'm really curious about that and how some people have compulsion or it has a similar reaction. I don't know if it's also because there's lactose and there's carbs in the cheese, but for some reason, butter seems to be fine for me. And I don't have that same kind of effect as with cheese, but we could get into that. I want to get back to your story, and there's so much about it that I could relate to. I loved reading your blog and seeing your wedding photo, and I understand what it feels like to be uncomfortable in your skin, and also had a brother that teased me a lot. It's just part of growing up. But there were just a lot of things that I could relate to, but especially just with carb addiction and food addiction and how you kind of made that transition where, you talked about having, if you were a heroin addict or other kind of drug addict, just having little bits of it all throughout the day, even if it's a small amount, it would just drive you crazy. And I can see why so many people just feel better with eliminating them altogether and just going full savory. And a lot of people find that from doing a keto diet. And it seems like some people have found that too with doing zero carb. And I just found that really fascinating. So for you on a day-to-day, I know you mentioned that you really see food as fuel now. And that's something that I really, really connected to. And just being able to kind of get on with your life and seeing food just as fuel and not as like this comfort, this pleasure, this entertainment. So I think you said that on a day-to-day, you have kind of meal prepped grilled burger patties and you just keep those in the fridge and you pull them out when you're hungry. What does that day-to-day look like for you?
Several burger patties in the fridge at all times. And I am really low maintenance when it comes to food. I am like the opposite of a foodie at this point. I want to be fueled. I want to be full. I hate the feeling of being hungry. And as long as my food makes me feel energetic and happy and full. I don't need it to be entertaining anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So some people are like, really? You just eat burger patties from the fridge? I said, well, if there's something else being offered, like my mother-in-law, she cooks every Sunday night. Pork chops and roast beefs and these baked chicken. She has to give me just straight up meat that I can have. And it's delicious.
So
I love it. It is. And I eat it all. Love it. But for myself, just day to day, I am fine with steaks and burger patties and whatever meat is just very cheap that week and easy to keep in the fridge. As far as reheating it, I just eat it. I let it sit up for just a little bit till it's not freezing cold. If I want to heat it, then I do. But I'm a teacher. I don't have a lot of time when I'm at work to eat my lunch. I just pull out a tub of burger patties, get full, and don't think about food again for several hours. I love that.
The thing that I've really been so curious about is, why people would kind of choose to not have any carbs at all. And what I've been observing from this, doing carnivore trial for myself and interviewing other people is there seems to be this qualitative shift where you see food really just as fuel and not as this, comfort thing, this, like I mentioned before, this pleasure, this entertainment, it becomes something else where people develop like food fixation and food addiction, which I know I had and have dealt with for most of my life. But when you shift to seeing food just as fuel, it's not entertaining enough to be something that you fixate on, but it's just enjoyable enough that you enjoy your food when you eat it, but it's not something that you kind of look forward to or fixate on. And I found that really, really interesting about people who have, dealt with food addiction and, done or tried this kind of zero carb lifestyle.
Oh, huge. When I first started reading those journals over at the Zeroing In on Health page, like I said, that's no longer a forum, but now it's a Facebook thing. For those who need support, it's a great page. I help admin over there. And there's just, I think about 21,000 of us carnivores at that site now. Mm-hmm. So when I first started reading, no one there seemed like they wanted to spend a lot of time thinking about food. They would say, oh yeah, I just sometimes eat my 2 pounds of meat, 2 to 3 pounds of meat at lunch, and I'm not hungry again till the next day at lunch. And my first thought was, why would you do that? I loved eating. And I thought, why would you want to go longer? What else do you think about all day? I mean, that was just such a part of what you do 3 times per day. It was kind of odd for me to hear of people who didn't want to think about food all day. And now I get it. Now, I've never gotten quite to there where it's just once per day. I do have 3 young children and we eat together in the evening. So I still eat twice per day. And I would definitely eat more if I was hungry, but I'm just not.
Right. Now, I'm curious, when you first started doing carnivore, did you go through a withdrawal period from like this stevia, like the sweetened foods and some of the carbs that you were maybe eating? Was there an adjustment period? And then I think you talked a bit, I'm not sure if it was on your blog that I was reading, that, there's this saying, the more you have, the more you crave and want, and the less you have, the less you crave and want.
Absolutely. So for me, the transition was very hard going from my standard American diet to when I first started the diet that the doctor put me on. That drop was incredibly hard, like the shakes for 2 weeks. Oh my goodness, really difficult. But then the transition for me from that very low carb to zero carb was actually so easy for me. I've seen it be more difficult for people, but for me, I think I was just so hungry and excited to be able to eat real fat and food, and to finally for it to click that those last little bit of carbs are the reason you're having to work yourself to death. And once I got rid of that last bit of sweet, I was drinking some diet soda and I did miss those. I cut them all out. At the first day I found that zero carb forum, I never had another diet soda again or any artificial sweeteners. And I did miss the bubbles a little bit, but it didn't take long. It was not a hard transition for me. And to be able to just eat as much as I wanted quickly filled that void. And the energy I've felt from real food and from the lack of fat making that up, that was huge for me. So I never looked back at that point.
I find that so fascinating because Dr. Ted Naiman, he has this theory that people have cravings for all these kinds of foods, like sweet foods and salty foods, because of protein dilution in our Western diets, and that people are just not getting enough protein and fat. And so we had these cravings because the body will want you to eat, say, if you eat enough dark chocolate, you're going to get protein. If you eat enough cheese, if you eat enough of these carbs, a lot of them do have some protein in them. So the body will just crave food until it somehow gets its protein. And I find that really, really interesting because that's been a trend that I've seen and witnessed with people who are doing zero carb, is that their cravings go away because they are getting so nourished. And I want to go back to talking about how you said at the beginning, you just wanted to eat a lot of fat and that made sense for you. Were you saying that because of your hormones and your, the struggles you were having with fertility?
Well, I do think eating plenty of fat was important. And again, I was not doing fat bombs. This was all fat that was actually on the meat. In the zero carb community, we don't try to focus. We don't say eat all the fat you can. We just say, listen to your body. If your body at this meal wants a lot of fat, then find some meat with a lot of fat. And at this next meal, if your body wants something lean, then find some meat that's lean. Eat what looks good to you, what tastes good to you, what makes you feel well. Sometimes people hear, a high-fat meat is good, so they force that. They'll just shovel in as much fat as they can. They're running to the bathroom all the time with loose bowels, and they're wondering, what am I doing wrong? And your body's trying to let you know, hey, that was too much. Don't choke it down. Eat what tastes good to you. And at that point, that is what my body was wanting. And I do think for me, it was an important part of getting my hormones regulated and of becoming pregnant. I think my body was letting me know, you need this right now. At this point, I don't typically add, I prefer the taste still of an untrimmed ribeye, but I'm not like crazy craving it like I used to. I kind of relaxed about that.
Hey guys, just taking a really quick break to talk about the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. If you're interested in doing a ketogenic diet for yourself, it's a great place to start. I teach you everything about how to follow a keto diet to get yourself into nutritional ketosis. And it includes 28 days of meal plans. It comes with weekly shopping lists, how to interpret results, how to test yourself, a complete guide to getting started on keto. If you've been keto for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want to in terms of your health or fat loss, or you are brand new to keto, the 28-day challenge is a great option because it also comes with my free coaching and support in our members Facebook group. And you can post any questions that you have about the meal plans, about keto, and I am there supporting you. We have an amazing community in our group. I like to call it the happiest place on earth because everybody in there is so excited about following keto, about having found something that really works well for them. And everyone in there is just so kind, caring, generous, and supportive. And it's a really fun place to be and hang out. So if you'd like more info on it, you can find it at ketogenicgirl.com. And it's the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And now, what I find so interesting, and I think so many of us can relate who've gone keto or low carb, is that, when you first start this diet and lifestyle, you really indulge in the fats. Like, can I really eat this? Like, you finally have this license to go ahead and embrace eating fat. And you're like, if you're like me and you were avoiding it, and, I always say I was just using those spray cans of oil. I was so terrified of eating fat. I was so convinced that eating it would just immediately go on my body. And, we were just warned against the health dangers of fat. So when you first go keto, you're like embracing the fats, and it's amazing. I didn't even remember what fat really tasted like and how satisfying it is. And, full fat Greek yogurt, full fat mayo, using these incredible oils, avocado oil and fresh, creamery butter and all these things. It's such an incredible experience to be able to do that and then feel how your body loves getting those fats. It needs those essential fatty acids. And I love the way you put it, just being a happy mama lion. I think I heard you say on a different interview. And you're just this happy mama lion who, hunts and eats when hungry. And the rest of the time, you're just living life. And I think it's so cool to be able to tune into your natural instincts the way that, that's why I mentioned the lion thing, but tuning into what your body actually wants and needs. And I remember, doing keto initially when I was able to eat, marbled steak or a fatty piece of meat and extra bacon, I would go for it. And now tuning into my body more, there are times that I find that I do crave it more. And there are other times when I could just leave it as well. And so there's just this experience of intuitive eating that I don't think I've really had since I was a little girl, when I would just eat, really more aligned with my instincts, and then kind of trained out of that and having specific meal times and, planning what to eat and trying to make it as healthy as possible and all these things. So it's really an incredible experience to, I think, through keto and low carb, tune into your body again. And I refer to, carnivore as keto because it is a form of it and it is just, zero carb. I really want to ask you about your electrolytes. So what does your electrolyte supplementation look like? Do you do any at all? What's your sodium intake like from doing, low carb? And what does it look like on carnivore right now?
I also think your body lets you know salt-wise. There have been times when I have not liked the taste of my meat being salty, so I just didn't salt it. And then there are times when I'm currently in a phase where the salty meat tastes so good to me. In fact, I've just been adding extra. Even after I cook it, I'll take a bite and I'm like, no, I think it needs a little salt, which is not that I've salted it any less than usual. It just suddenly tastes better to me. And so I also just follow my body's lead on that. When it tastes good to me, I add more. And when I don't want it, I add less. I don't have any issues with cramps. That's the number one thing I probably get asked about in regards to salt, is some people suffer leg cramps, especially at night. And I did in the very beginning. And I don't know that it was salt related, if it was just part of adaptation, or I don't know.
Can be magnesium sometimes with the cramping.
It could be. And I'm about to have my 9-year zero carb anniversary. So I had 5 years before that of more keto, low carb, and now 9 of carnivore. And I don't have any issues with cramping. And the best advice I know to give is regarding salt is just trust your body once again. Eat what tastes right to you. And if you are having some health concerns, then I would, sort of tinker around with what makes you feel best in regards to adding salt or not. But it served me well to just go with what I'm craving, either more or less.
Right. So you weren't taking it as an added supplement.
Oh, no.
Or adding it to a glass of water, anything. You're just kind of adding it to your food, to your meals, right on the meat that you eat.
No, I wasn't doing it medicinally or anything, just for what tasted right. That tends to work well. I know quite a few very long-term carnivores, much longer than I am. That's all they do. If they want salt, they add it. And some have not wanted salt on their food. A friend of mine, Dana, she's been at this more than 10 years, and she stopped salting her food years ago. She uses no salt whatsoever, and she says that totally works for her. She has zero issues with cramps either, but she does not like the taste of it. It's not that she avoids it because of, on purpose. She just doesn't like it.
Do you have the same doctor as you did when you started out?
I do. I love this man. He is, I'm going to guess, in his late 80s, and he is almost retired. He doesn't see patients very often anymore, but he looks so fit and still does so well. And I'll be very sad when I can't see him anymore. But he is incredibly supportive of what I do. He still checks my blood work because I like to post that on the blog. People want to see numbers and paperwork. So I share, cholesterol and calcium levels. He tests all the vitamin levels and everything. And everything is great. And at my last appointment, he said, Kelly, I don't think it would kill you if you added a little bit of greens back in. Right. But since you're my healthiest patient, don't change a thing. I said, well, I don't plan on it. So yeah, he's really a cool guy.
Now you mentioned that you used to do a lot of exercise, quite a bit of exercise, in fact, when you were doing low carb. Now, what does your exercise routine look like now? How has it evolved over the years of doing zero carb?
So when I first started zero carb 9 years ago, they recommended, just that community of people, my support group, recommended take a break from the gym. You're wanting to get pregnant. You have no cycle. You are tired. Just rest. Heal for a while. Just eat and rest. And that's what I did for like 7 years. No, even more than 7 years. Basically for the past 9 years. And it's not that I'm sedentary. I'm a music teacher. So I'm up and about with my students. I have 3 young kids, ages 7, 5, and 2. So I'm not just sitting around on my bum all day. But for these 9 years, I have not worked out until the past 2 months. About 2 months ago, I wasn't having any issues except I felt a little bit of tightness in my shoulders. Not pain, but just a little tightness. My husband goes to the chiropractor, so I thought, well, I'll just go and chat with him. And he said, he gave me an adjustment, which, wow, that's really weird if you've never had one. My whole back just, cracked. And he said, oh, yeah, well, actually, you're in great shape to have not been to a chiropractor. And I said, well, good, thanks. He said, you're not having pain. I said, no, I just feel when I wake up in the mornings a little tightness. He said, are you exercising? I said, no, I haven't in several years. He said, well, sometimes exercise can help you just stay a little bit looser, keeps your muscles and flexibility up, maybe just add some light exercise. So I looked at my life and thought, I think the most I'm willing to dedicate to this is 7 minutes a day, which I know that is not much. So after my children go to bed, my husband, he usually goes downstairs, he feeds the dog, changes clothes, and then we watch TV together. And I thought, I probably have about 7 minutes in between those two things. So I go out and I do something for 7 minutes. I've learned to do cartwheels now. I'd sometimes jump.
Oh, cool.
So I thought something just to stay, and it has my pain, but my neck feels great between my shoulders now when I wake up. I either jog for 7 minutes or do yoga for 7 minutes, some push-ups, something where I'm not out there trying to lose weight at this point, but just to keep some flexibility and strength kind of thing.
I find it so fascinating because I used to do so much exercise and it was always with single-minded goal and intention, just to optimize my body composition. And by that, I mean burning fat. And when you're doing it with that goal in mind, it always kind of feels like this punishment, this thing that you have to do. When I started going keto and low carb several years ago, I stopped doing that. I was doing, 60 to sometimes 2 hours on the treadmill. I had a treadmill in our living room. I worked out so much. And I started just going back to going for long walks along the waterfront and listening to audiobooks and doing yoga, which feels like such a more rewarding way of moving the body. And it is a great way, like you said, of staying loose and stretching. And I really enjoy, going for long walks, going for hikes, going for yoga, just because I have the urge to move my body I like to think of it should be a reward for the body and not a punishment. And I find that so interesting that as I've been, following this path, that I've had these urges to move my body in these different good feeling ways. And it's such a shift from doing it as a way, just burn calories or burn fat.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yes, I actually really enjoy that 7 minutes of each day. And throughout the day now, sometimes I'll be out in the backyard watching the kids play, and I just suddenly feel like doing a cartwheel. I mean, what a blessing to be able to, it's amazing. I'll be 40 on my birthday, and to be able to just feel so good that you feel like jumping on the trampoline with your kids or doing a cartwheel is awesome. And not because I think, I better go out and do some cartwheels so I lose a few pounds. It's a completely different mindset.
Now, from looking at your photos, you look like a very fit person with great body composition, and you look like someone who does exercise and does work out. So it's really cool to see that, I don't know if you had a lot of lean mass before you had all of the fat loss or, from all the working out that you did before, but you do look like, you're in really good shape.
Thanks. If I had muscle before, I do think I was always my parents said I was stout. So I may have had some muscle under there, but it was very well hidden. And I do get asked a lot if I had a lot of loose skin or if I had to have surgery, because I did ultimately lost 130 pounds. And for most diets and people who lose 130 pounds, that does not always look very good afterwards and does require surgery. I have not had any surgery, and I do think there's a difference between how a lot of people lose 130 pounds, which these days tends to be like a gastric bypass or even a starvation diet where it's done by literally, these surgeries that lap band and things. You starve yourself. That's the idea. Just you don't feel it as much, but you are malnourishing yourself. So they end up losing hair and having loose skin. On a diet, keto or carnivore, you are so far from malnourished. You're the most nourished you've ever been, but with true food, that your body does not deteriorate. You lose the fat stores, but you're not losing your muscle underneath. I don't have loose skin. And I know that part of that, they say, well, some of that must be genetics. I'm sure genetics play a part in every single thing about us. But I do think there's a difference between allowing yourself to starve versus truly feeding your body and allowing it to just simply lose the fat and retain its muscle. And I don't lift weights or anything, but I have been told, in fact, I've gotten some hate mail that says, I saw you showing your muscles on a picture wearing workout clothes, claiming that you don't work out. You're clearly a liar. And I felt, well, thank you. That's really nice.
That's the most backhanded compliment.
Yeah, exactly. I did do a photo shoot. It was for the Daily Mail, and they requested that I wear workout gear, very specific workout gear, which I thought was funny. I had to go out and I bought it for them. Just for that,
That's
because
hilarious.
I didn't have work. Yeah. And I said, no, I don't normally go around flexing my muscles, but it's what they ask me to do while wearing a sports bra and some like workout leggings. So yes, a backhanded compliment indeed. We'll take it. And the best thing I've ever heard is I've heard people say to me now who didn't know me, 14 years ago, say things like, it must be nice to be able to eat like that and be so naturally thin. Oh my God, my greatest dreams have been realized. Sometimes I tell them, sometimes I don't.
Now, I'm so curious to know what you think of this whole carnivore trend, because, you've been doing this for a while. You've been doing it for over 8 years. I know 9 years this fall. And it must be so interesting to you to suddenly see all these people talking about it, trying carnivore, and there being all this dialogue about it. And there's a lot of controversy that comes with it too. And what I find interesting about it was when I first heard about it, I also thought it was slightly insane. And it wasn't until I tried it for myself that I realized, well, we're in the low carb space, and keto, you're in the very, very low carb space. And carnivore is basically just zero carb. And I do wonder if the name carnivore does it a little bit of a disservice, because it brings about these images that, you as a woman, you're taking down several cows a day and you're just eating all this meat all day long. When really, if you put a plate in front of you, a keto plate, and you had a steak and salad, people look at that and go, wow, what a delicious, healthy, nourishing meal. And look, what a perfect meal. And then you take the salad away and people are like, well, now you're just a psycho. So I find it kind of humorous in that way that people are so shocked by it. But at the same time, I understand, because I was too. And we're really, especially being a former vegetarian, you live off of plant foods, and we learn to venerate plant foods and vegetables as, the holy grail of health. So to even question them is almost blasphemous. And then you have all this information now coming out about the anti-nutrients in plant foods, like, oh, well, maybe we should be talking about these things. And, maybe there are certain people who can't tolerate tons and tons of vegetables all day long. Maybe there are certain vegetables, we always know about nightshades having, reactions in people, but just having a dialogue and exploring it, I think, is really interesting. So I'm so curious, what you think of this carnivore trend. Obviously, it's coming out of this, keto movement, and so much attention is going to keto, but it's also coming from a place, I think, of just a real foods movement. You look at all these different, paleo, low carb, keto, Atkins, zero carb, carnivore. The fundamental basis of all of it is just eating real food. So I love to hear what you think of all this.
Yeah, so it is funny. Now when I order my steak without sides, people say, oh, are you doing keto? The other day someone said, oh yeah, I'm trying keto too. I was like, what? Keto? Oh, good for you. No, and so it is easier these days to just say, yes, I am, because it's on their radar, which is nice. So the term zero carb is what we have gone by for many, many years. And the problem with zero carb has been for us, we've gotten a lot of criticism of people who say, well, I don't know why stevia and Splenda and, your sugar-free Jell-O, Diet Coke, why you guys say I can't have that, because it's all zero carb. And technically that is true. And then the other thing they'll throw at us is you can't eat eggs and claim to be zero carb because eggs have carbs. So it is a name that we have used for many years. It's not a technical name. Of course, eggs have carbs. All food has trace carbs, even meats. We know that. And even some foods that are zero carbs, like a Diet Coke, we don't consume. So it became easier for us to say a zero carb, carnivore, animal-based diet, even though it's long. We had to give it some further explanation because we were getting folks who were just really upset that we weren't technically zero carb. But I do prefer it because it does seem like a natural thing from going from low carb to very low carb, keto, zero carb. There, see, I just lost the salad.
It's funny. I talked about this on my carnivore experience recap episode. And, I think it's just, there's something about the verbiage that's being used because, if anyone's done an egg fast for a week, which a lot of people on low carb have done, they've done a week of carnivore. If anyone's had, just bacon and eggs for breakfast, that's a carnivore meal. But, when you think of it in the framework of low carb and keto, it doesn't sound so extreme. But when you think of it and have this word carnivore, it just takes me to the Serengeti, taking down wildebeest. It's a term that really shocks people. And there's something about, just the word that I wonder if it doesn't, do it a bit of a detriment or disservice to have that word. But I understand, it's a technical term and that's what you're working with. I'm curious to know what you think, of all the information that's coming out now about anti-nutrients in plants like these lectins, salicitates, oxalates, and, it reminds me of, it still have some of this backlash, but when I would question fruit for people and post anything about fruit on my Ketogenic Girl Facebook page, there was always such a backlash where people would get so upset about me questioning fruit. And I'd say, well, that big bowl of cherries has the same amount of sugar as a Snickers bar. And, people would really get up in arms about it. And now people seem to be more open and understanding that fruit has a lot of vitamins and nutrients in it, but also has a lot of fructose. And that's why it's important. If you're doing a lot of juicing, you're getting a ton of fructose without any of the fiber to slow down the absorption. And, orange juice and Coca-Cola and soda drinks are really not that different when you look at them just from a sugar content. Even some of the, coffee drinks and lattes and things, they have so much sugar in it we don't even realize. So I'm just curious what you think of all this information coming out about plants and questioning, plant matter and these anti-nutrients.
So I was listening to Dr. Georgia Eads the other day on a podcast. Oh, and now she's just this super smart, awesome doctor she's gone zero carb carnivore. She's feeling great. And She already has so much, just this wealth of information about all the things you're just exactly talking about. And it feels so good to hear someone that smart validate everything I'm feeling for 9 years. And for me, I already felt it and experienced it myself. So I didn't feel like I didn't need the proof because I feel like I'm living it every day. But it's nice. I'm not going to lie. It feels really good to hear somebody that you respect to say, you know what, this is why. And for anyone that hasn't listened to her or read anything she's written, you should check her out. She's great. But it's cool to see these links posted all over Facebook about, do you really have to eat your vegetables? And I am not one, I try not to be obnoxious, to pipe up and be like, see, I told you so kind of thing. But it is pretty gratifying. I'm not going to lie. But I already felt it. I felt it myself. I knew how much better I felt when I got rid of just that last little bit and went just full blown carnivore. Like I said, I suddenly felt like Wonder Woman. And to see someone else come up with the why, I'm not the why girl. I know some why people. Charles Washington, he's been zero carb carnivore for it'll be 11 years this month. And Amber O'Hearn, I've heard her on some podcasts. Jennifer Lechner, she's so smart. And all these people are zero carb carnivores for about the last 10 years who also are the why. They're so science-minded and well-read. And I'm more the one that comes in with like, here's my before and after pictures. Here's how I felt, just the experience. I'm just the how I feel, how I look, my experience person. But it is nice to hear it from the why folks too.
Right. Now, I have some fast rapid-fire questions here as we wrap up. Chicken, pork, or beef?
All of the above, but I prefer beef. So I'll eat any meat as long as it's not breaded or covered in some sugary sauce. But I tend to feel my absolute best, can like stay full for the longest, have the best energy levels. For me, and this is not just me, it's a trend. It's a thing. People just tend to feel their best on beef.
I've seen it, and I've noticed it myself too. Now, how do you normally cook your beef? Is it fried, baked, steamed, or grilled? Do you have a preference?
I love grilled, but I'm not super picky about it. Grilled is it's really easy to throw tons of meat on a huge grill. And I like mine to still be pretty medium to medium rare, a little pink still in there. And that's pretty easy to accomplish on a grill. So that's just my preferred method. But again, I'd take whatever's being served.
Yeah. And are you more rare, medium rare, well done?
Ooh, I can't deal with well done. I prefer for mine to be medium rare to even medium is okay. But there needs to be some pink still there.
Right. I've noticed some people doing carnivore tend to go more and more towards rare meat, which is interesting.
Yeah, I know. I've noticed that too. We even get some people who show up and they assume, like you said, when you hear the word carnivore, they assume that we are eating it raw. And that's what they're all about. And there are some people out there who just eat it all raw. That is not the majority of us, though. Most of us are cooking our food. But you're right. We do tend to lean towards the medium rare-ish cooked meat.
Now, do you have a personal preference for grass-fed and grass-finished meat, or grain-fed or corn-fed or organic meats or organs? Do you have any kind of preferences on that? Or, how do you make your choices in terms of your meat consumption and quality?
I tend to say, eat whatever meat you can afford and that tastes good and that makes you feel good. For me, I actually prefer the taste of grain finished. And I know there are going to be some listeners that are like, okay, I'm done with her. But I just prefer the taste. I have definitely tried. So grass-fed implies that the other cows are not eating grass. All cows are out there eating grass. And at the very end, your grocery store beef was fed grains towards the end because it does tend to improve. It gives them some more fat and improves their taste. For me, I prefer that. I did buy some local meat that was grass finished. And I just didn't enjoy it as much. I can't say that I felt any better or worse. It cost me a lot more and I didn't enjoy the taste of it as much. But if you or someone else prefers the taste and can afford it, go out and buy a local cow. I'm sure your farmers would appreciate it. And eat whatever you can afford that tastes good and makes you feel awesome.
I find it so funny because, my husband and I are over here in Prague and they often advertise foods as corn-fed as though, wow, it's corn-fed because the meat has, I guess, a better flavor profile to it because it is fattier. But back home, everyone just wants grass-fed, this and that. So I always find it funny on the menu, or we go to a restaurant and they're like, get our corn-fed, chicken or meat. And it's interesting. But overall in Europe, most of the cattle especially is grass-fed in general, which is kind of different from in the US where it is sometimes more corn-fed or grain-fed. But that's interesting. Now, are you more an advocate or silent follower?
An advocate or silent follower of just a zero-carb carnivore diet?
Yes.
Well, I am happy I try not to be obnoxious. So if people are not asking, I try to just eat my meat quietly. But if people are asking, then I very happily will tell them because it did change my life so positively. And I have a blog where I'm very excited when people want to know and gladly share a link to it. So I like to think of myself as an advocate. I am on the Zero Carb Facebook pages every single day trying to answer questions. But those are people that are there wanting to learn. So I don't want to shove it in people's faces who aren't asking. But if anyone is interested, I could go on for days.
I can tell you're really passionate about it, and that happens, when your life is really positively, changed or affected. Now, do you supplements or no supplements?
I don't, no.
Yeah. And do you do fasting or no fasting?
I don't. If I were to eat so much meat that I was not hungry again for, say, 12 hours, then I wouldn't eat for 12 hours. But I don't consider that fasting because it's not purposeful withdrawal from food. If I eat and I'm hungry again 2 hours later, then I eat 2 hours later. I just eat when I'm hungry and I don't when I'm not. And I don't consider it fasting. I'm just following my body's lead.
Right. Obviously, no testing. You don't do anything like that.
No.
Now, possibility of ever eating carbs again in the future, possible or never?
I don't know how my body would react. And at this point, I'm going to say probably never, but not out of fear. I think at one point I would have said, oh, never, because I would immediately gain all the weight back and have cravings. And it was more of a never due to fear. And now it's more of a never due to why would I? I don't miss them. I don't crave them. I don't feel like my body needs them. I feel far better without them. And I have no desire to. It would be almost at this point like asking me, so do you plan on never having cocaine? Because it would be like, why on earth would I plan to start that, Exactly. My body isn't asking for it. And I know how much better I feel this way. So no, I don't have plans on going back.
Now, if you were to put something on a billboard out there for everyone to see, what would it say? Well,
I drive a giant, well, it's not giant. It's a regular sized minivan, but it is a very orange, like a burnt orange minivan. And on the back glass, it says, Carbs kill, my zerocarblife.com. So I guess that's about it. about as close to a billboard as I will ever have. And it's not huge, but it's there. And I guess that sums it up for me. I was slowly dying. At age 25, I was just inflamed, infertile, depressed, maybe not clinically depressed, but I was pretty bummed out about life and felt awful. And so for me, carbs did kill. And I am living the second half of my life now. This was so life-changing that the quickest thing I can say is if you want to read the story, I've put it all out there. If you're worried about my cholesterol, I've put my numbers out there, which are awesome, by the way. And
that's amazing.
I would happily share that with anybody that wants to read or listen.
You know, your whole story, you're almost making me a little emotional because I can feel how much this has impacted and changed your life personally for the better. And I just want to thank you for opening up your life and sharing your story. It's very unique and very interesting. And you're just an absolute delight to speak with. And I can feel your joy, you know, just coming through in your voice. And so thank you for opening up your life and sharing because, you know, these are controversial topics, but it does make people stop and think and question things. And, you know, it takes people like you to share their story of doing things differently in order for us to be able to have dialogue and question things so we can all be better off and healthy as a society in general. And, you know, you just have a very unique and interesting story. And I'm fascinated learning about how different people thrive in different ways. And zero carb is definitely one way that you found that you thrive. So it's been awesome to have you here today, Kelly. And now where can people find you, read more if they want to read your blog or follow you maybe on social media?
Thanks. It's www.myzerocarblife.com. And zero is just spelled out Zero, My Zero Carb Life. Also, if you just ever Google Kelly Hogan carbs or Kelly Hogan beef, I found it comes up pretty quickly. Or other Kelly Hogans.
And you have an Instagram?
You know, I do. It's Kelly_Hogan 91.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much again for being here, for sharing your time with us, sharing your story. It was so interesting, and I just appreciate you being here. I look forward to continuing to follow your story and your journey as it evolves, and thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
Oh, this was my pleasure. I appreciate it so much. Hope you have a great day.
I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode with Kelly. I had such a great time learning more about her experience with a zero carb and carnivore lifestyle. It was very, very interesting to me. I find it endlessly fascinating to learn about how different people thrive with different lifestyles and approaches to eating. But what I love about the connection between keto and low carb and paleo and carnivore and zero carb is it's all just focusing on eating real whole foods, single ingredient foods that don't come in a package or a box, usually, unless it's a little bit of packaging, but a single ingredient food that anyone could recognize as food throughout history, and nothing that has been created really in a factory or with tons of additives, processing, added sugar, flour, vegetable oils, and all these things that can cause some reactions in certain people. So I love that it's really all about the whole foods movement, and there's different ways of doing it, there's different approaches to it, and I just love learning more about how people live their lives and thrive in different ways. So I think it's endlessly fascinating. So thank you for joining today. If you liked today's episode, please leave me a rating or review. I would love to read it, and it would mean the world to me. And if you're interested in more information on doing keto with me, you can check out the Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. And if you have any questions at all about how the program works, the meal plans, the recipes, the coaching, membership, you can send me a question at the Facebook page, which is The Ketogenic Girl on Facebook. And I'm always over there working with our members, coaching them and supporting them and answering any questions. So it's the best place to reach me if you want to send me a question. The Ketogenic Girl on Facebook. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next episode, I hope you have a fat-fueled rest of your day.